Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
This episode of the House of Mystery is brought to you by Legacy Food Storage. The best way to protect your family is by being prepared. LegacyFoodStorage.com.
New U.S. sanctions on Iran took effect today, 6 months after President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the international nuclear deal.
The sanctions target Iran's shipping, financial, and energy sectors, all key to the country's already struggling economy.
Bombs, which the FBI referred to as improvised explosive devices, were sent to the FBI's bomb laboratory in Quantico, Virginia.
We're in Mexico again tonight as thousands of migrants try to find a faster way to the U.S. border. The White House says it's now getting help from the Mexican government.
Breaking news out of Pittsburgh. The man accused in the shooting at the synagogue in Pittsburgh is pleading not guilty, and he also wants a jury trial because he's facing a 44-pound sum.
In the final seconds before the Boeing 737 MAX crashed into the water, it was traveling at more than 500 kilometers an hour. All 189 people on board were killed.
You've now entered the House of Mystery.
Crime, conspiracy, history, and science.
With your hosts, Al Warren, Mike Brown,
Julie Sav, Michael Butterfield,
Dr. Joseph Usinski, and Michael Hawley.
Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
You are back in the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren, the guy at the controls, and we've got a real crowded room, but everybody is socially distanced and wearing a mask, especially Eric, the doctor, Eric. How you doing, Eric? Yeah, so what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Oh, I'm excited. I'm particularly excited today because you graced me with allowing a dear friend of mine in as the guest, also a terrific filmmaker. So this is a special edition of House of Mystery.
Yeah. I didn't know you knew Oliver Stone. That's great.
Yeah. No, there's so much confusion. Yeah. Don't get me started on Oliver Stone. I can talk for like 4 hours without stopping.
I know his son, Sean.
Oh, how do you know Sean? Oh, he's sort of into conspiracy stuff, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a nutball.
Oh, okay. I know he was, what did he do? He converted to Muslim at one point, or?
Well, now he's into the earth. He's been going out and he goes out with a pair of underwear and a sweater, and he goes sits in the field for like about 2 months at a time.
Well, I mean, he's Oliver Stone's son. I mean, that's how he was reared.
Yeah, but I like him. We get along great, and I have his number. I should give it out and have people call him. But but the thing is, he goes off on these tangents. He gets really into these things, just like his dad, And
oh yeah. And he's like lit. Yeah, he seems cool. I mean, I know he's also tried to get different things going, like movies and being an actor. And he's like, his career has never really gotten momentum. He's sort of in his dad's shadow.
Yeah, it's got to be hard. But
yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah,
and sitting, we got a new co-host that's been sitting in lately. His name is David North Martino, or we're going to call him Whiskey Man.
The Whiskey Man.
He's a whiskey aficionado,
Yes. Of course. I mean,
well, yeah. That's important.
I don't think now is really the time for inside jokes where it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah. No, he really is.
What do you know about whiskey, David?
Well, I drank a lot of it.
Oh, good. Okay. Oh, fair enough.
No.
Yeah.
No, I drink Scotch. I drink Canadian whiskey, bourbon, rye.
Oh, nice. So it was the Canadian whiskey that sold out.
Yeah,
that was what made it.
Yeah, it wasn't his writing. God.
No. I usually. Oh, you like Canadian whiskey?
Yeah. No. He's a good writer. He's a good writer.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, sure. I have no doubt.
Yeah. Now, so we've got a guest you picked today, and it sounds fascinating. I was checking out her work and some of the websites, and I know the web series Dyke Central is kind of the most popular item, but it looks like there's a lot of work behind her. So so thank you for joining us. We've got Florencia Manovil. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you didn't leave.
It was only a few minutes, too.
I was laughing quietly. Eric brings up Oliver Stone pretty much every single conversation he can, so I thought it was a hilarious
I'm the biggest fan.
Oh, you see, and I can't stand him.
Are you talking about the guy or the work, or both?
Both.
Oh,
I don't know him that well. I've met him, but I don't know him that well.
Oh, he seems like sort of, I better be careful with the amount of people listening, but he seems like he can be a difficult character.
No, and it's not even that. It's just, I really don't like a lot of his filmmaking because this is what we'll talk at Florencia. You can jump in on this. What do you think of someone like Oliver Stone? And I don't mean personally, and I don't mean politically or any of that sort of stuff. But when you look at his filmmaking itself, and as you as a filmmaker, is he someone that you respect, or it's not the right word, but is he someone that you look for any sort of an influence on how you film?
Wow. Okay. I think you're really putting my friendship with Eric on the line asking me that kind of question.
No.
I'm holding back a gushing dam right now.
My wife hates Oliver Stone, so just...
He's difficult to love. Go ahead.
I am not going to touch that because I really, the Oliver Stone expert in the virtual room is Eric. But I do think that I have a very different style and aesthetic pace that I'm drawn to. And this is something that Eric and I talk about often. I am more of the sort of Ang Lee, Wong Kar-wai pace. I really am drawn to. I just watched Nomadland a couple nights ago. I'm really drawn to films that allow you to sit with the sort of the texture and more gray areas and like nuances of humanity, and not necessarily the like super high highs and low lows, but more of just all of the the gamut of color. And what I mean by sit with, I mean like a slower pace where you're just really allowed to take in the images, really feel what's happening and not necessarily be in a very intense roller coaster kind of thing, which I think is more of the Oliver Stone and Eric preferred type of thing.
Well, that's one aspect of it. Like when you look at the action and the roller coaster, that's just one aspect. But I mean, as the filmmaker itself, the problem I have with something like watching Oliver Stone, so take away the story. Let's say we're not going to talk about whether he's got a good story or not, or he's telling the truth, because he tries to do a lot, like JFK and all that stuff. But the actual filmmaking itself, for me, Oliver Stone seems really boring. There's no he doesn't involve the set. He doesn't involve enough of the surrounding world. It doesn't hold me. If the story isn't working, I can fall asleep.
It sounds like you're saying he doesn't let it breathe. Is that what you're saying? Like it's too frantic, like he's shooting eyeballs and pairs of glasses, and like
there's not a lot of like just like Florencia said, there's not a lot of texture or color. I understand that being into music. I don't get it. Like I said, take away if you're not following the direct story. So let's say that he's telling a story, and you look at the filmmaking itself. If you look at the pictures, if you took the volume down and looked at the picture, I don't get a whole lot of
access.
I don't find it. I don't know. Do you understand what I mean, Florencia? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I
Well, let's not pick on Oliver.
Yeah, I know we really went there. I think the word access, actually, Eric, is a good one for me, at least. I think that it is not. I think his work is not an easy emotional access for me.
I think that's true. I think it's a bit of an acquired taste. I wanted to say about Florencia so we met each other at Emerson College in the late 90s. We went to, I was studying writing, literature, and publishing, and she was a film student. And something about the visual aspect of her movies I want to talk about today is, it's interesting when you think about quote unquote visual filmmakers, you usually think about how they set the frame and how they move the camera. And Florencia with Film Grammar speaks in that way as well. You know, there's careful composition and movement and blocking and so forth. But what I always found fascinating about her movies is what's in the frame, whether it's the look of a face or the shape of a body, or like she said, the texture or the color is very, very intentional, which I love. So it's visual in the sense that the subject populates the visual mindset, which does bring to mind people like Ang Lee. So is that accurate, Florencia, the way I just described your aesthetic to an extent that it's mindful in terms of what you're putting in front of people?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, I think that I'm just an emotionally driven person. And so I think like the face is definitely a priority for me. And all of the elements that are really focused on evoking emotion over style or, you know, whatever else.
And you're also, something that also struck me in film school is something that happened, Al, when I went to film school. I was a huge film geek growing up, as many film students are. And I'm into Scorsese and Oliver Stone. Not so much at that point. That actually got acquired a little bit later in my life. But Tarantino. And, you know, Tarantino's a strange case because his movies are personal, but he's a huge pop culture geek. So that's what he's expressing. But I was really interested in personal filmmakers. I mean, that's why I wanted to go. I studied writing, but I was always making films, and I'm very much a filmmaker. And I went to film school. I was kind of disappointed by, and not to be too snobby, but some of the other film students' like favorite movies. Like I expected, like not like it was going to be real rarefied, and we talk about the classics. But when people told me like Terminator 2 was their favorite movie of all time, I'm like, yeah, I mean that's an amazing action movie. But I was really surprised. I was like, wow, this is the generation of film students. And what struck me about Florencia's work, and it was really, I can't even emphasize how unique it was among the pool of students, and then later as we all moved into doing it in a more professional or just adult capacity, just how personal it is. And that's why I've always liked it and liked reading her scripts before she's in production and seeing the work. And I really was excited to talk about the Florencia, the personal dimension of your movies and what you have to say about, you know, what types of people and what type of world you're generally going into.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. That's really sweet.
Oh, for heaven's sake. No, yeah, of course. Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting. I remember being in college and it's fascinating. I mean, everybody kind of makes films for different reasons. And for me, it is absolutely just a form of self-expression and processing my life and my experiences, whereas and I'm also interested in watching personal films. I think I like films that really mean something personally. So Terminator 2 definitely not in that realm.
Yeah, so would you define your films? I don't mean to label or pigeonhole too aggressively, but is it fair to say that your films and your TV show is queer cinema? Is that a applicable label?
Oh yeah, that's an applicable label. Absolutely.
Yeah, because one of the most striking images from Dyke Central, and it's been a couple years since I watched it, but there is, I believe, a trans individual who is female appearing but has a beard, and that exemplifies what I was trying to describe about your visual sensibility, because it's unforgettable. I mean, it's iconic, and it's the sort of image like most pop media that's feeding your eyeball is not going to feed you. And I felt, it's just one of many examples in your series and across your features and shorts and so forth that's bold. So I wanted you to talk about representation and capturing your own community through these mediums.
Yeah. Actually, she is just a woman, like a cis woman who has a beard.
Who has a beard.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, yeah, in response to the question at large, I am just very bored by Hollywood cookie cutter aesthetic in general, let alone that politically and personally, the whole like skinny, white, airbrushed, model-looking representation of women is something that I want to like very intentionally counteract and battle with what I put on the screen, because it's extremely toxic and dangerous that women and girls don't have a range of people to look at on the screen who they might see themselves reflected in, and they might see as beautiful and heroes or flawed, but whatever. So that is an element that I come with from my childhood, and not seeing anybody with my like body type, because I'm not a skinny person, reflected on the screen, and just knowing just how pervasively problematic that is. So that's one element, and then broadening that onto I always give this example, but it's very true. In the queer community, we, in the not male gay, but in the assigned female at birth side of the spectrum, we only had the L word, and the L word at the time, right back when I started creating Dyke Central, the L word is very skinny, white, covered in makeup, very femme, and that my queer community in the Bay Area, it was absolutely not seeing itself reflected in that one only show that was like the only thing available. So I really felt I wanted to represent, and also it's such a beautiful community. I mean, and there is such diversity, exactly like this, like woman doesn't look like one thing, or if even femme woman doesn't look like one thing. This character that you're talking about was a femme woman who happened to have a beard naturally. And I think actually a lot of women have beards, but it's completely unacceptable in society, especially in straight society, to have a beard if you're a feminine woman. So that they have to get rid of it. So this person who in her life had it and performed it, and it's of course acceptable in the queer community, or more acceptable in the queer community, so she's able to have that freedom to express or just to naturally be how she was born.
I'm sorry, I missed the step. I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you say the beard was natural, or what? It was natural. She grew it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah. It's sort of like an overlooked possibility for women.
Exactly, and actually, and that's the thing. I mean, we don't even know that actually a lot of women can grow like goatees or whatnot, and because they absolutely remove it, because otherwise, they'll be mocked and just not fully accepted in society. But in queer community, there is just more latitude for people to express themselves, their gender, their identity, as they naturally are. So that's the beautiful thing about the queer community, at least where I live, in the Bay Area. Because I think in LA it is much more because of its proximity to Hollywood. Actually, I mean, after after all this, like I did go to LA, and being in the LGBTQ community there, I'm like, oh, actually, these people do kind of look like the L Word people. You know, it's not that the L Word doesn't represent. You know, it is still Hollywood, and that's why Dyke Central is set in the Bay Area, and Oakland is such a part of the show because it's a very special thing that we have here that that isn't that level of like freedom to and acceptance to truly like let people be quote unquote weird, which is, you know, what is weird,
but that's not just a female, like a woman lesbian part, because look at Queer as Folk and some of the others. Everybody on there was pretty and skinny and had perfect hair and teeth and everything, right? Like they do that to us too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of what San Francisco Bay Area is on the forefront of, is breaking that mold. Like even, you know, for obviously, I know less about the gay male side of it, but you know, the same with like bears and just embracing different body types and celebrating different body types and expressions of gender all across the spectrum. I think that in the Bay Area, it's something that is at the forefront, and I've seen that even in, you know, I have a proximity to the queer film festivals. My work has screened at many queer film festivals in the country and outside of it, and the queer film festivals of each place really kind of represent or reflect just this difference in the places. And the Bay Area one, Frameline, which is the longest running one, really has work that like maybe wouldn't be shown in Outfest in LA or in other places, because the Bay Area is sort of at the forefront of breaking those barriers of like of what is acceptable and how far we can expand in our expression.
It seems like, from what I pick up online, like on Amazon, where Dyke Central is still streaming on Prime, right? It's still there. I know it's platformed elsewhere too.
Yeah.
It seems like Oakland is grateful. Like you really caught the intonation and temperature and texture, as you said, of the area, because it seems like there's a very common reaction across, whether it's Amazon reviews or social media posts or whatnot about Dyke Central. It's like, oh, she got it. It's here. Like, it's here. There's finally a mirror being held up to us. Is that something you've seen in the reaction?
Yeah, people have been really, really effusive in their response, which was really nice. I will say it does feel, to me now, a little dated. We shot the pilot like 10 years ago, so there are things that are a big part of the Bay Area that are not in the show, like the housing crisis. You know, now I think there's parts when I watch that pilot and they're like, oh yeah, there's a room for $500 or something. And we're all like, wow, that is really not the case, because now it's finding housing is very difficult. You know, there's a whole element that I actually did want to get into if I ever did a season 2 and never got to. So in a way, it did capture a moment in time as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, with the Hollywood thing, and I know you tie this back to your more formative years in terms of body type and what you want to represent, did you ever have any interest or working in or succeeding in Hollywood, or was that always something that you had more of an antipathy toward?
Antipathy.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because so it was never like you had stars in your eyes, like you were dazzled, like, oh, I'm going to make it, I'm going to be famous. That was never the motive. It was always just the cinema and using that medium to express yourself.
Yeah, and I think also, we're talking about favorite movies when we were in college in those formative years. Like, I think my favorite movies just were not Hollywood movies to begin with. And also, I do remember, like, in college being in very, very toxic masculine, like, bro-y sets, and having an understanding that, that's what, the quote-unquote industry is just having to tolerate that. And I just don't have that tolerance or patience for,
Yeah, and I would say that's still the norm. I mean, that's kind of like when you talk about like set dogs or set kids, like there's people that live on sets, it's predominantly male, I would say still. I mean, isn't that sort of the thing?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's one element. And then the other aspect is I just have zero interest in ever living in Los Angeles.
Yeah. God bless you. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, I was waiting to get out for a long time while I was there.
Yeah. And
we're on Los Angeles radio, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking about the best city in the world.
But
go ahead.
The third aspect of it is that I also remember there was a point I was watching movies and being like, wow, a lot of these movies are filmmakers talking about filmmaking. And it's like, and even when I went to LA and would visit some of my friends who work in the industry, all they talk about is filmmaking, and they talk to filmmakers. And I just had this clear sense that I want to be in the world and make movies about the world, like real life. And then, you know what I mean? And not just like be navel gazing as a filmmaker without any like connection to what like real world is.
Yeah, I think the peak of that syndrome for me was Entourage. Like, it's so, like, L.A. up its own ass. Like, it's like, and the thing about L.A. is I was there for 14 years out, and I had highs and lows. It was a huge adventure. I was in the business. But the thing I noticed when I left and came up to the Bay Area was I had felt so much pressure the whole time I was there. Like, I felt a sense of pressure to be relevant, to be succeeding, to have a scripting option, to be, hired on commission to write something. And it's just that sort of atmosphere, because it's such an industry town, like Florencia is saying, like it infuses and saturates everything. And I like find it when I'm making films up here, I actually find it easier to think, because I'm not like, it's not cross-indexed with what any other group of people is up to. And another thing I got to say is on my first, and this was a pivotal moment in terms of me and Florencia becoming closer, whether she knows it or not, is on my first feature, my crew was entirely women. And that wasn't by design. It was sort of by happenstance. It's like, ooh, this person's available, that person's available. And before I knew it, the crew was like 85% women. And I realized how relaxed and non-charged and grounded it felt, stable, or at least for me. And that was a big thing. And I thought of Florencia instantly. I was like, aha, I'm starting to understand. Not to drag men and not to make some broad-based statement, but there is something to be said for sort of shuffling the deck and changing the atmosphere of how a movie is actually made, because there seems to be in so many cases like one set standardized approach.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably a big uphill battle for you then. Not only being a woman filmmaker, but filming something that is accepted in the major media, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say that's not really a primary concern for me. I have this sense of just kind of like doing, in a way, I guess I operate a little bit more as an artist between, quote unquote, than as a, filmmaker, in the sense of I'm just doing the things that are interesting to me, that I am really juiced about and wanting to explore, because I think there's this kind of filmmaker track where you can get into the mindset of like, what am I supposed to be doing? What is wanted of me? And actually that changes so quickly. And it can be very confusing. I remember when I first started doing Dyke Central, there were a lot of like, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. And first off, like nobody really knows what you should do, because the filmmaking landscape, especially, I mean, with the advent of digital filmmaking and streaming, and the digital way of like watching films, consuming content, whatnot. Things are just constantly changing. So there's actually nobody actually knows how things should be done. So there's that. And I think it's very noisy out there in terms of like messages for filmmakers or filmmakers who want to grow or make it into the mainstream or this and that. You should do this, you should do that, you should do that. For me, obviously I'm not somebody who like has a comfortable relationship with authority and like somebody tells me I should do this, let me do this. That's not really how I operate. I'm very much like, singing to my own tune or whatever the phrase is. But also I think that, I think it makes sense for me internally, psychologically, emotionally, creatively, to just work on the things that I want to make. And then, if at some point something sort of fits into what some distributor or some higher power in the film world is looking for, then great. I can make whatever I'm working on, serve that, but not to just to take that as the starting point, what is wanted from me? Let me do that. I just don't really create that way. And going back to for me, this being really first and foremost of a form of self-expression, like just the language that my, muse speaks in, or whatnot. That said, I am currently really excited about developing a project that definitely needs structural support, from the film higher powers, whatever those might be. So it is an interesting process to do the thing that I innately want to do, and then, have to create the materials that are needed to bridge the communication between where I am and where that world is, if that makes any sense.
We interrupt our programming. This is a national emergency. Important details will follow.
Are you prepared? Legacy Food Storage. The best way to protect your family is by being prepared. Go now to legacyfoodstorage.com. Use coupon code HOM15 now for 15% off. Quick, go!
You're listening to the House of Mystery radio show. History, crime,
So part of the subtext of everything you just said is that you've never, in addition to not being driven toward the Hollywood dream, you're not motivated by money. Like this is not, you're not, and that makes you unique among, I think, all the filmmakers I know. You're not, I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're not, it's not like, okay, eventually I can make a living. That's the hope I'm pinning my life to from doing this. It's completely more, like you said, on the art side of things.
Right. I feel like we're about to have the Francis Ford Coppola conversation, Eric.
Oh, sure. Yeah. By all means. Absolutely. Agreed. And connected to everything else we talked about, part of me being like, hey, I want to live in the real world I want to make a living. And I don't want to have to be in toxic environments, unless I don't want to be on set unless it's my own movies or isolated movies that I choose, because I want to support this film being made as opposed to like just having to work on set and put up with it. So because of that, I make my money, in a different way. I'm a translator and interpreter. And I'm also a parent, and I wouldn't really be able to parent the way that I want to parent if I were making films for a living. But I am not money motivated. That's correct. And therefore I do get to do whatever I want with my filmmaking. But I feel like we should share with the others, Eric, the Francis Ford Coppola thing, which is, there was this article, and now I don't know if I remember who sent it to whom, whether it was me to Eric or Eric to me. Yeah, I think it originated with you. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because this is a topic that comes up a lot, right? And there was this, like, I think, Eric, I think you were living in LA at the time, and it is this pressure we're feeling, like this concept of like, if you are not making money off of your creative work, you're not successful, or that's
you're worthless. Like, you're in the gutter. Yeah.
Right. And I obviously never really had that perspective. And as I also I know a lot of people, like, for example, I remember Hal Hartley, who is a filmmaker who I totally admire and think that he's amazing. And I remember that he was teaching at Harvard, teaching film at Harvard. And I was like, look, if Hal Hartley has to like be a teacher, what I mean, to pay his bills. But then I guess I must have come across this article from Francis Ford Coppola that was about how he had the vineyards in order to support like his filmmaking. And then it was like, okay, if Francis Ford Coppola, Yeah,
I mean, and he's been at the tippity top of the industry. He's won 5 Oscars. He's had box office smashes like The Godfather, Apocalypse Now. He's like been in a spot to know and be demythologized and demystified from all the hype. And he's now at a point now where he has his vineyard, and he makes, I think Coppola Winery makes like a couple $100 million a year. And he every so often will take off a chunk, something he can afford to lose, like $2 million or $10 million or whatever it is for him. And he'll just make a film. And I think his last one, Twixt, with Val Kilmer, was like scarcely even distributed. It was like something he just wanted to like have on a shelf somewhere. Like, he's totally over it. And that was very healthy for me, because playing the game with distributors, I mean, in a lot of cases, it's like criminal behavior. They rip you off. They sell your movie to international territories. You never see a dime. And it's just such an uphill thing, the making a living piece of it. But I still have the passion for cinema itself and to do it. So it is a help to look at somebody like Coppola. M. Night Shyamalan, too. His last 3 movies he paid for by himself, just from like real estate money. And he got mainstream distribution for Universal, but it's him. It's just like, all right, I'm going to make it just the way I want it. My own screenplay, my own vision. Because he had failed with After Earth. It was like $120 million, and it's just like he lost tens of millions of dollars. And I can't imagine what that experience is like. But at a certain point, that purity is appealing. And that's what I've always admired so much about how you've approached it from the beginning. You were so ahead of that curve in terms of just a real simple relationship to it, in the sense of, wait, hold on, these are the things I want to say. This is going to light my grid and make me passionate, and this is just the way it has to be.
Yeah. Exactly. Of course, the very tricky thing about filmmaking is that you do need money to make it. It's not like, I'm going to make this painting and, you know, I just need some paint. You know, you need the labor of several people and equipment and whatnot. So that's the tricky part, is that you still need resources and how to get those. Well, you know, it's the forever filmmaker struggle.
Yeah, it's a hustle. Yeah, and you're always pulling from all directions. I know, like, for a lot of your projects, you've crowdfunded, right?
Actually, only one of them.
Oh, only one. Okay, I lost track.
Only the last one. No, yeah.
Okay.
No, okay, that maybe not. No, that's not true. We did crowdfund a little bit for Dyke Central. It just wasn't particularly successful. I mean, I despise that process. I mean, now
that's a tough thing to do.
I mean, especially, you know, 10 years ago, I was definitely just really resistant, and people were like, you have to do it. And we did need to get funds from somewhere, but it wasn't particularly successful, or like we got maybe just like a couple $1,000s here and there. The last movie that I made was like, okay, I'm going to take this crowdfunding thing as a very serious thing. It's like my job for a month. And it was still very unpleasant, you know, but yeah, I think that one was more like 15,000 or something like that.
Oh, okay. Did that campaign get to the end? Did you get the amount you wanted?
Yeah, I didn't get the full amount, but I think once you cross the 80% line, you got the funds, and we basically did that. And yeah, that was for the short Solstice that I made. That's a like longer short. And
which was beautiful, yeah. Yeah, and you so for the one you're working on now, I'm not sure how much or if you want to get into it, but you said it would require more establishment support. So in other words, it would probably be like in the millions of dollars to produce it.
Well, it's a series.
Yeah.
I feel like, I think it's also just the vision I have for it. I want people to see it, you know, and I think that it needs to have full funding. I don't know if millions. I mean, for me, because I'm a scrappy indie filmmaker, I'm like, oof, even just with, you know, $200,000. I mean, absolutely make it great. But you know, then there's the whole thing of having people with, you know, with a bigger name, or just it's a whole different world than what I operate in. But I do think that I have to dip my toes in that for this particular project, because it's just, I think it's important, you know. It's important to me, and I want people to see it.
Got it. Okay. I mean, Al, it was interesting because you and I were talking about film financing in the past couple of weeks, and you were just like flat out. You're like, you get nothing out of it. Nothing comes back. It's like, it's funny because as recently as like 12 years ago, there was still enough mystique where like a lay investor would think like, ooh, I'll invest in a movie. It's sexy. But I think because of the internet, the word is so out that it's so hard to get it back out. And you put money into something, right?
Yeah, I've got the Gacy film from John Borowski coming out. I'm the exec producer. But you know,
that's awesome.
The thing is, I know I'll never make it back. That's why I said, you know, I only do so much per year, because I look at my income and then I put out. But it's sort of, I'm kind of doing both for myself, in the sense that I write some really commercial books, all the short read series in crime and murders, and they sell like crazy, and they sell every single day, and they bring me income. And then I write serious things that I really put myself into, that mean something to me, which don't pay me that well, you know, off and on. And the thing is, when I see someone like John Borowski's made some great web shows and series and some films, and so I thought this new one that he was doing, it's been a couple of years now he's been working on it, and I thought, this is a great piece of work, so I'll put money into it, because I believe in what he's doing and the product at the end, and that's all that matters. So it's kind of one of those, I put it in two groups, and either it's I'm into it and it's a good project that I believe in, or it's money.
Right. And that's a very healthy, sort of pure way to look at it. Well, what's good about what Florencia was describing with her series is if the money comes from a more establishment source now, it would be a streamer like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. And what's good about the way they're monetized is each individual piece of work doesn't have any pressure on it to profit. It's all about the subscriber base. So that has brought like a sort of quasi-socialism to filmmaking, because it's like if you make The Irishman for $200 million, you don't have to account for it later. It doesn't have to come back to you. It just has to be, to help, all ships rise with that tide on that platform and help Netflix keep its shine. And that's it. And for Amazon, it's like they want to keep people on that website to shop. And that's it. Like, so if you have people looking at the Amazon logo over and over and watching shows, it serves them in umpteenth other ways across all the products they sell. So it's sort of an elevated, the reason I pointed out that you had that mindset, Al, in terms of like it being more for the product, or with Florencia not being money motivated, I think I hope, I might be naive, but I think it could kind of be trending in that direction, because I know filmmakers historically have despised the box office, especially as it's become like the Monday morning news is like, all right, what happened at the box office? Of course not now because of COVID, but so it's good. I think it's just healthy.
But there has to be a point when you take on a project, you have to kind of know if it's in your heart and you're into it, and this is a good project. Then it's not about the money. The money's not. It's about getting the money to do it. Like it becomes secondary. Right. But but you've got to make money too. If you have a talent to be able to like to make movies, then it's okay to make commercial movies. It's okay to make, just like I do commercial books. It doesn't make my good work bad. And I know a lot of people think, oh, you're sellout, and they'll just write you off because of it. But I don't believe in that, because we've got to live too, right?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because to my mind, the whole concept of a sellout, like, which is a punk term, like coming up in the 80s and 90s, it's like, oh, you're sellout, you're selling out to the man or whatever. It's like the economy has changed so drastically. It's so splintered. Like half the people I know have like 7 different jobs. Like you've got to, like you have to, like anybody who thinks like you don't have to work that sort of hustle to survive is like not paying attention. So like, of course, like I'm over here doing journalism, fiction, filmmaking. I mean, it's always been diversified.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think it's like whether you are doing that money-making hustle in the same realm as your creative work or outside of it, you have to do it somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I could choose to work a job. I could work at the drive-thru and make money. I can work at a department store, and it's about money. But if I'm able to write for a project for a publisher that's going to pay me, I'd rather do that than work at McDonald's.
Oh, absolutely. And also, there's so many logistical things, like you're at home, you're on a flexible schedule, you're using your God-given talent, all those things.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I'm from the 80s sellout era too, right? But hey, it's all good. But I was going to ask, so Florencia, when you do one of your projects, a film or a series and stuff like that, what is the take home? Like, what is it that you want people to take away from your project? Like, for instance, let's take Dyke Central, because it's something we all know. So at the end of Dyke Central, besides the top story, the main theme and all that stuff, what do you want me to feel or take away from?
Oh, I don't think I have a fixed, a singular thing. I think different people will take different things from it depending on who they are, especially something like Dyke Central, because there's so many things going on that my mom, who knows nothing about the queer community, will take something very different than people who write me. To this day, I get messages about people who have just watched Dyke Central, and they're like, oh my God, I felt this way. I felt so identified, because they are very much relating to the characters. And that's even unpredictable. I don't think I can be thinking about that personally. Although when you ask me the question, I am thinking there's a short that I might shoot next month that I'm very excited about. We'll see if COVID restrictions allow, but that one is kind of a conversation between two people of different generations who have, Gen X and the millennials. Not the millennials, sorry, Gen Z, which is like my kids' age. And I think with that one, I do maybe have something that I am getting that, in between those two generations, I'm getting out of it. But at the same time, I don't think I could even predict what like people from Gen Z would get out of it by watching it, or Gen X. I think it's very much the kind of thing where like I have to just make it from a place that is authentic to me, and then you free it into the world, and then it lands wherever it lands for people. And honestly, that's one of the things that I love about screening films in person, like having Q&As, because I've also had experiences where just people come up to me after and then they share where it landed for them. And I absolutely, there's no way that I could have ever like controlled or predicted or planned just what things touched people in particular. And it's that's the beauty of it is the unknowable element there.
Yeah.
Are you, when you get those emails and people say, I felt seen, I felt represented, is that gratifying? Does that give you joy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, 100%. The amount of messages I've gotten about Dyke Central, like make it feel very worth it, even though it was grueling to make and everything. But those are the reminders, or even in moments where I'm like, why am I even filmmaking? What is the point? Those like, those dark nights of the soul there where you're like, what am I even doing? Those messages are very validating in those moments. It's like, oh yeah, it matters. This is not me in a shoebox making something for myself in a very self-gratifying way. This is how it works. Mm-hmm.
Okay. While we have you here, because I know we're running out of time, I wanted to ask you, because we've discussed this before, and I thought this was a pretty punk move on your part. The word dyke, wasn't that sort of an impolitic choice at the time you made it? Like, weren't you sort of like on the borderline where that was like seeping into a more appropriate lexicon, or can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The word dyke being in Dyke Central is the reason why Dyke Central like couldn't be in more like mainstream. Yeah. A lot of people were like, oh, we can't take that. We can't take this if you're attached to it. But here, I mean, and it goes back to the previous conversation about, representation of life in the Bay Area. Here, the word dyke was reclaimed. Like, Dyke March is an annual thing that happens. It's like the word dyke is very beautiful and embraced and whatnot. And it's not like that in the rest of the world, but it was important to have that word because this is not Hollywood, and was not something that was made to like be palatable to the mainstream. This was something that was made to be an authentic representation of like this community here, and this community here uses that word dyke. I did get to explore that in episode 2, where they just had that little conversation. I was like, they need to actually talk about the word because it, just to clarify my position. So they do that in episode 2, in a big way. And, I felt like that was.
Did you ever get any like outright disapproval or like finger pointing or finger wagging or anything like that outside of certain entities or venues not wanting to carry it?
Some of the comment, if you go to YouTube, there's the first and second episodes are on YouTube, and they have long comments. I am not a YouTube comment reader, but cast members are, and they'll like share stuff with me, and sometimes I've gone in there and read them. Definitely here and there people are like, I'm still not comfortable with this word, it meant this, especially older people. They're like, this word was very like violently used against me. And that's fine. I don't need to take away from their experience, that there's, that's a whole other conversation, but.
And there's the, people put too much power into the words. I think you just know where someone's coming from when they're saying something. So when they're saying it with hateful intent, it doesn't matter really what the word is. That's how I look at it, but that's just what I've learned over 50-some years in my life. It seems like it's really about the intention of someone when they're talking to me that I take more than those stupid words. They just, they're not that important. But what am I?
Agreed.
Well, I want to ask though, Florencia, with your intention, I'm just curious to go into the deeper cynic, because obviously your intention on that end of things with that title was sound and it was good and great. I mean, you're representing in a very positive way, and that's without question. But I'm wondering if you were also, since you were cognizant of the fact that it was a bold choice, if there was any side of you that felt like you were sort of standing up in that way, like with boldness, or was that not really a motivator?
I would say yes, and in the same way of having masculine of center people, women who are masculine as the protagonist, that was also kind of a thing, that I did get pushback. They were like, oh, people need to be pretty. First off, to me, the people in the show are very attractive, so it's like, okay, I understand that for a different view, you have a different lens, and yes, it is very important for me to keep this as I am doing it, because there is a lack of this,
well said.
Well, we are running out of time here. We are getting on the edge. So, Florencia, let's give out your contact. So do you have a website or a place that you want people to go and find out about you and your work?
Oh yeah, my website is Mynah Films, so it's MYNAH Films plural.com, and then Instagram Mynah Films, same thing, MYNAH Films, and Facebook, same thing.
Okay. Yeah. We will link that up with ours so people listening to the show can find you with one click and give you the feedback about Dyke.
Sounds good, yeah. I'm here for it.
Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
The mission has been completed.
The end! By George, he's got it! It is the end! I'll see you.
If you're lying to me, I'll be back.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.